Blake Cousins, Third Phase of Moon. I'm on location right now on assignment. I'm coming in a little scratchy, so we're broadcasting as best as we possibly can. But I got a special guest tonight. His name is L.A. Marzulli. Earlier this month in Los Angeles, he revealed to the world, basically, the truth in regards to the Paracas skulls, the mystery. Where are they from? What does the DNA reveal? They've spent over $100,000 in DNA research in regards to these mysterious skulls, these elongated skulls with quite astonishing information coming from this DNA. Basically, the phenomenon of these DNA results have revealed that the elongated skulls of Paracas, Peru, are not native to America. And what does this mean? What does this entail? Well, we've got L.A. Marzulli with us, and he's got some reasonings behind these new discoveries, these revelations, the Paracas skulls, Peru. Everybody, hang on. This is Third Phase of Moon Radio, and we're going to be doing it right now. L.A., you with us?
I certainly am. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, now that you're back, and there's some new updates in regards to the Paracas skull mystery, and the DNA results have been given to the world. What is the major media's response to this? Did they jump all over this? Or are they talking about it first off?
Well, it's amazing how the mainstream media did absolutely nothing. No one covered it per se, which is just amazing to me. I mean, we were told that CNN and MSNBC and some ABC was supposed to be there. No one showed up. You guys showed up. Thank you. Telemundo showed up. Jaime Maussan showed up. But that was basically it. It was, in some regards, it's very depressing. Meanwhile, we've had several hit pieces written about our research, but they never saw the presentation. So they're writing, this is how it's played, folks. Trust me, this is how the game is played. These people never saw the presentation. They have no idea what data was presented. They have no idea what our findings were, but they've already made up their mind, and they wrote hit pieces on them. One is this little weasel guy called Jason Cavaletto, and I'm calling you out, Jason, because you're a disinformation agent. That's who you are. You never saw the presentation. All you did is create ad hominem attacks against me and the other presenters. You act like you know it all, but you don't know anything. Attack the data. I could care less what you think about me. Attack the data. And guess what? Since he never looked at the data, how can he possibly weigh in on it? It's one of the most disingenuous pieces that's ever been written. Same thing with this guy from Mysterious Universe. I don't know his name, but I'm calling him out. He wrote a nice little hit piece on us, never attacked the data, doesn't even know what the data states, went back and looked at something that was written 4 or 5 years ago from Brian Forrester, which frankly should never have been posted. Never have been posted, but was. It's water under the bridge, and he attacks that. He has no idea of what our findings are, no idea of what the 58 DNA samples that we took that cost over about $150,000 to do by the time we were done, has no idea of the morphological differences between the Paracas skulls and normal Homo sapiens sapiens. So, I mean, with all due respect to these people, I have no axe to the grind with them. I have no idea who these people are. I met Cavaletto once at a conference a number of years ago. I have no axe to grind with any of these people. What I do have an axe to grind with is people who are disingenuous and are either shills, paid shills to basically disinform the public, or don't do their research and act like, somehow they're like on the top of the totem pole and they're going to tell you what's really going on. But they've never looked at the data. Look, I don't care what you think of me or my team or my worldview or anything else. Look at the data. Res ipsa loquitur. The data speaks for itself. 58 samples, not all of it, but many of the DNA samples point to a Middle Eastern or a European origin. That does rewrite history. That's not a hyperbolic statement on my part. That's no hyperbole on my part. That's legitimate. It shows that there was transatlantic or trans-Pacific migration thousands and thousands of years ago. And, of course, this goes against the prevailing paradigm in academia, the scientific community, which is why we get all the blowback. Look, folks, I don't care about the prevailing paradigm. I care about the data. If the data didn't speak what it says, I wouldn't be on the phone. We'd be talking to you guys. We wouldn't have had a press conference. But the data says something. The data is telling us that we might be looking at a subspecies. So, we're completely open and transparent. You can go to the video. It'll be available very shortly on DVD. And people, Marzulli's selling a DVD. Well, after I spent $150,000, don't you think I'm entitled to do that? And we had great backing, and thank you for the G's for doing this. But, it costs money to do all this stuff, folks. And when you buy a DVD or you buy a book, you're helping us keep going with the research. So that's what that's about, and I'm not going to address that again.
Absolutely. What you're doing is basically, it seems that the history books need to be rewritten, and some people are having a really hard time with it. Like the major media doesn't even want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because then they're going to have to go and do their investigation. And look, major media is not really doing this anymore. They're going for really basic news, and they're not getting in depth. And what you're doing, it costs money. It takes time. You're dealing with experts, and now you're proving solid evidence from the DNA extraction from these Paracas skulls. Now, this is something I'm thinking the major media doesn't want to touch it because they don't really want to work hard anymore. They're already basically programmed not to even deal with this kind of subject matter because they don't want to rewrite the history books. They're perfectly happy the way it is, but go ahead.
It's amazing. When I was out in Catalina Island, and this is all part of the same malaise that we have in academia and the scientific community. I was at UCLA, and I'm not going to mention any names. I don't want to embarrass them. But I had access to Ralph Glidden's collection, part of his collection, which was held in this one area. And there was a couple of archaeologists and anthropologists and a tribal member from Chumash to make sure that we, honored the skeletons. And I walked in there, and they were all Native American, okay? But when I went out to Catalina Island and I examined the original photographs and journals from Ralph Glidden, he was out there performing primitive archaeological digs between 1919 and 1921. He was employed by the Hay Museum. I paid a $1,000 contribution to the museum to enable me to look at the records. When I was there, the records had been pretty much picked over. In other words, I wasn't looking at virgin material. Everything had been cataloged, put in museum boxes, manila envelopes. It was all nice and neat, okay? But I was there for 10 hours, and I combed through everything. And what I found there was absolutely amazing. I found 6 fingers. I found elongated skulls. I found giants. I found a giant that was 2 of them, actually, that were just under 9 feet tall. And I published this in On the Trail of a Nephilim. Now, you would think that they would contact me. It was on the History Channel, In Search of a Lost Giants. It went viral. All they did was write a hit piece on Ralph Glidden, who was the alleged archaeologist who discovered this stuff, and disparaged him. But they never attacked the data. They never, in fact, what they did is they took the photograph, which I had discovered, a 5x7 black and white photograph in the archive showing Ralph Glidden standing in front of a very large skeleton circa 1919. Okay? I published the photograph. I had the photograph analyzed by 3 different analysis, and they all priced it right around 9 feet. Well, I published that, and the museum was absolutely in a tizzy, and they took the photograph and they cropped the giant out of the photograph and wrote a hit piece on Ralph Glidden. Now, that's completely and utterly disingenuous in every way, shape, and form. That's not science. That's an agenda. That's someone's paradigm.
It's a major media blackout.
It's a blackout, and it's the same thing happening with the Paracas skulls. They hire these guys like Jason Cavaletto. With all due respect, I mean, the reason why I call Jason a little weasel is because he's a little weasel. He never comes to me and asks me about the data. He just writes a hit piece and acts like he's Mr. Know-It-All. And frankly, I take great umbrage with Cavaletto's, I'm sure he's employed by some agency because the moment we publish this, there he is, boom, out with a rebuttal, but he's never looked at the data. So, how can you write a rebuttal when you have no idea what the data says? You're just making stuff up. And that's why it's incredibly disingenuous, and that's why he's a weasel. And I'm calling you out, Jason. Hope you hear it.
Hey, Jason, if you're listening, man, you could call in right now, Third Phase Moon, and take on LA, because it sounds like LA's, after this flu, he's got a rebirth going, and he's gunning to get the truth out, which I really appreciate and admire. What's important is that we are getting the word out in our way. I know we've helped, and there's other people out there that got work. Millions of people are aware of this. Now the major media needs to get on this and take this very seriously, because right now, I remember you did your presentation in Los Angeles, and you were biting your tongue a little bit, because during your press announcement, you were basically, sticking to the science, and you're kind of holding back your personal thoughts of what the origin, who are these Paracas people discovered in a place that they shouldn't be. Now, let's get into a little science, and then we'll get into a little theory of what you think. But what's the most astonishing thing that you've learned in regards to the DNA and the extraction that convinces you that there is something important here, that these Paracas skulls shouldn't be where they are?
Exactly. First of all, we did 58 samples, from two different museums, the Paracas History Museum and the Ica Museum in Ica, Peru. We had permission from the Minister of Culture. I had letters of transit. So we did everything legally. We did it by the book. We had full body suits, lab suits, that was given to us, about 50 of them actually, by the Paleo DNA lab up in Canada. Mondo Gonzalez, our archaeologist, and I flew down there along with Chase Plotsky, our forensic field expert, and Richard Shaw, the director and of the Watcher series, who filmed everything, and thank God he was there. It's all documented. And Mondo and I changed out of our suits over and over and over again. In other words, every new sample that we took from a different skull, we would change out of our suits completely. Go out of the room, strip out, put new suits on, blow each other off with air, double gloves, mask, hat, full body suits, double sleeves, booties, and we'd go back in, new Dremel tools, bleach on the Dremel tools. I mean, we did everything by the book, and I mean literally by the book, to make sure that the contamination, so because people always go, contamination, it's all contaminated, it's contaminated, we can't trust the results. How many samples do we have to do, 58, before we can at least look at the results and say, guess what? It's not contamination. Something else is going on here. And that's the whole point. All we're saying is the data is saying that it's a Middle Eastern/European origin, which is what our hypothesis has been all along, that about 3,500 years ago, during the conquest of Canaan, the Promised Land, which is written from three historical texts. One, the Torah. Two, Josephus, the first century Jewish historian. Third, it's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we're not talking religion here. I'll take that card right off the table, and I did that at the conference. We are looking at the historicity of these documents, and that's how we're viewing them. We're viewing them strictly as historic documents. But it talks about a war that was prosecuted in the land known as the Promised Land. And there were these certain tribes that were there. And what we're saying is, during the prosecution of the war, some of these tribes may, underline may, have fled the area, ran for their lives, in other words. And if that's the case, do we find evidence of that? Now, that's a real stretch. I get that. But that is our hypothesis. That is my hypothesis. When I say the team that I assembled is behind that, but not everyone, adheres to that. What I mean by that, Brian Forrester doesn't necessarily adhere to my hypotheses, but that is my hypothesis, and that's what we went out and tried to prove, and that's the scientific method. So what we would expect to find...
Let me ask you this, though. This is really strange to me, because the Paracas skulls, the cranial volume, which is 25% larger and 60% heavier than a conventional human skull. Now, besides the DNA, that alone is bizarre.
Well, again, those are morphological differences, structural differences, and there are numerous structural differences. That's why we had a multidiscipline team. When you get Rick Woodward weighing in on the Paracas skulls from an anthropological viewpoint. He's an anthropologist. And you look at the foramen magnum, which is the hole at the base of the skull where the spinal column attaches. It's the wrong shape. It's in the wrong area. It's some of these skulls are lacking the foramen ovales. The foramen condyles are completely different shape. I mean, we are looking at structural differences in these skulls which cannot be the result of cradle headboarding. And this is the problem. It's like academia and these archaeologists, because they're not anthropologists, because they're not medical doctors, and there's no multidiscipline task force that's looked at these things just go, oh, it's all cradle headboarding, and they just paint this. Everything with an elongated skull is immediately cradle headboarding. Well, gee, isn't that convenient? And where did you learn that? Well, I sat in school and I got my degree in archaeology, and that's what they told me. Okay, so what you're doing is you're mouthing the party line, but you've never handled a Paracas skull. You don't know anything about being a medical doctor, or what a medical doctor would look at these skulls, or an anthropologist per se, but you're an archaeologist, and I respect that on some level. But that's why we had a multidiscipline team. Mondo Gonzalez was our archaeologist who presented the DNA. Rick Woodward was the man who put the foramen magnum and the placement of that, and the fact that there was an aberration which could only be genetic. He was the one who discovered it. He was the one who wrote a paper on it. Then Dr. Michael Alday was a medical doctor who weighed in on it over 37 years of practice, and he knows about the foramen magnum, and he knows about cranial deformation. And this is genetic. He's saying it's genetic. Woodward's saying it's genetic. Our chiropractor, Dr. Malcolm Warren, is saying it's genetic. You can't cradle headboard this. You can't move the position of the foramen magnum. You can't do it. You can't reshape the foramen condyles. Why do some of these skulls have an absence of the foramen ovalis? The foramen ovalis are these holes in the base of the skull, right, way in the back of the jaw, let's say in the neck area, right? And this is where these nerve endings and blood vessels come through and enable us to smile, to grimace, to laugh, and they're absent in the Paracas skulls, in many of them. So we are looking at genetic anomalies which are in the skulls. All we're saying is, look, guys, we don't know what these entities are. We're not saying they're aliens or a Nephilim or anything else. No one's saying that. In fact, we're saying as far away from that as we can. My personal opinion, I think it's the Anakim. That's my personal opinion. I'm entitled to it. But I'm not stating that. I'm not stating that from a scientific viewpoint.
Let me ask you, are any of these skulls found anywhere else in the world with the exact same kind of 60% heavier than a conventional skull and 25% larger?
There are elongated skulls. There are elongated skulls found globally, and the problem is research is very negligible. There was one found on the steppes of Russia, and they made a big deal about this. Oh, it's elongated. Oh, it's cradle headboard. Well, wait a minute. How do you guys know that? I mean, you don't know where this skull is. You're just assuming it's cradle headboarded because that's what you were taught. Did anybody turn the skull over and look at the foramen magnum? Did they look at if it had a sagittal suture or lack of a sagittal suture, which is one of the primary differences that we've noticed with the Paracas skulls? Many of them do not have a sagittal suture. Now, there is a disease called craniosynostosis which closes that sagittal suture, and we understand all that. I mean, this isn't our first rodeo. We've been at this thing for 5 years. That's where Dr. Michael Alday comes in. He's stating that, these skulls are very young, or 25, 26 years old. Some of them are younger. It's not time for craniosynostosis. We are looking at genetic anomalies. That's what we all think. More testing needs to be done. I can't stress that enough. We need nuclear DNA, which we've not been able to obtain yet. And when we get the nuclear DNA, we get the other half of the equation. I mean, this is science. We're not making any of this up. The DNA and what the lab tells us, no one speculated. Mondo read the DNA report. He created a chart. He showed all the samples that we took, and here's the grid. You can look at it for yourself. It's in the book that I'm publishing. Here it is. We're not making this stuff up. We're reporting, and no one's like interpreting the data. Here's what the data says. T2B, that's Middle Eastern. E2, U2E1, that's European. That's what the data says. So people need to look at the data and then make up their own minds, and that's what the whole thing's about.
L.A., you got a few more minutes?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's take a quick break. Everybody stand by. If you've got a question for L.A. Marzulli, you could call in 347-934-0378. And then if you've got a question after you call in, press number 1, and you'll be able to ask anything you want. And Hopefully we get some answers. Everybody, stand by. This is Third Phase of Moon along with L.A. Marzulli. We'll be right back. All right, we're back live, Third Phase of Moon, taking your calls from around the world. We've got L.A. Marzulli. Let's go to area code 801. You've got a question for him? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious if he knows much about the lifespan of these giants and if they're some of the same giants that live to be several hundred years old.
Well, first of all, they're not giants. They're less than 6 feet tall for the most part, and that's what gets it's very perplexing. What we see in North America, and again, in Catalina, I discovered a 9-footer. That was a picture from 1919. But that skeleton that was there and unearthed by Ralph Glidden in 1919 is long since gone. But we have a picture, and we found 6 fingers. We found elongated skulls. There were giants in the Americas, but there are not giants down in Paracas. What's interesting is, and this is complete conjecture, I can't stress this enough on my part, one of the tribes that were in the Levant, the Promised Land, were called the Anakim. Translated, that means the long necks. Now, because of the position of the foramen magnum in the Paracas skulls, we posit that they may have had longer necks. Again, that's conjecture on our part. If that's the case, are we looking at the Anakim? We don't know. Total conjecture, but it's an interesting question. It's an interesting hypothesis, which is why we're raising that. There's a possibility that we might be looking at the remnants of the Anakim, which, by the way, were one of the Nephilim tribes designated in the Levant. But they're not giants. They're not giants, but they have morphological and structural differences which make them look completely non-human. I hope that helps.
All right, great. How long do you think the Paracas lived? These people discovered in Peru, what was their average lifespan?
The Paracas show up, and this is what fits the timeline. I remember when I talked to Brian Forrester about this years and years and years ago when we first started conversing. He figured that the Paracas were much older, and that, and I said, no, this, he told me that the Paracas show up about 3,500 years ago. And I said, well, that fits my timeline perfectly. In other words, the Paracas show up just about the time of the conquest of the Promised Land, about 3,500 years ago. The Paracas show up about 3,400 years ago. So, look, they could have come out the back door on the Red Sea. They could have come down and over a period of decades, wound up in Peru. Trans-Pacific migration. They could have gone transatlantic migration and then gone overland. We have no idea. We don't know. It's all conjecture at that point. But the bottom line is...
What about the individual lifespan of a Paracas human?
I have no idea. You see, this is... And I got to tell you guys...
Through the teeth and stuff that orthodontists could have figured out how old this one Paracas skull could be, or...
Yeah, we had dentists come and look at the dentition on several of the skulls. 25 years old was the cinnamon skull. The baby skull was about under 2 months old, about 18 months. I said 2 months. 24 months, about 18 months to 24 months, roughly. but that's just based on the dentition. So we really have no idea of the lifespan of these things. We have no idea. I mean, and I stated this over and over and over again. After 5 years of research, we have more questions now than we do answers, for crying out loud, which is why more testing needs to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's go to area code 320. You got a question for LA? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what's your view on the non-terrestrials that they're possibly real, and everybody pretty much knows they might be. What's your view on just contacting them? I mean, what's your view on that?
Contacting who?
If there's non-terrestrial beings,
okay.
Are they still here, or what's your view on that? Are they still here? What that had created these beings, or are they creators? What's your view on that?
Okay, there's two paradigms one can hold, and I am based heavily in the interdimensional camp. I think these entities are interdimensional. I think they can come into our space-time continuum and manipulate space-time, matter, and energy in ways that defy us, and this translates into the modern-day UFO abduction, where people have missing time, they're taken, they're floated through walls. So I think it's extremely complex. It's a very, very complex scenario, what we're looking at. And some people want to treat it in a very simplistic way, and I'm certainly not one of them. First of all, I don't have all the answers. Nobody on the planet does. But I think that what we're looking at are nefarious interdimensional entities who are obsessed with creating a hybrid being, and we're part of that equation.
That's one of the statements you were mentioning to one of our correspondents in L.A., the hybrid breeding.
Right.
There's something going on. We get calls of people saying that they've been abducted and then being conducted in a hybrid program. You just never know. But some of the evidence here definitely makes you wonder what's going on, especially the way the DNA evidence is going, and the questions and the mystery still deepens. That's what I find so fascinating about these Paracas skulls. 850, you got a question for LA? Go ahead.
Hello?
We're here.
Yes, sir.
Yep, you're on. Go ahead.
These elongated skulls. If they were like hunter gatherers, or if they were warriors, or do you have any information on what purpose they served?
Well, we don't know. I mean, they had a very complex culture. That much we do know. The tapestries of the Paracas people are some of the most intricate and well preserved on the planet. I mean, you don't get this type of textile weave until modernity. So, I mean, they were certainly advanced in ways that are just absolutely mind-boggling. They practiced trepanation, and we're not even sure what that was about. Archaeologists will say, well, they had a lot of fishing accidents. I just think that's an absolute nonsensical position to take. Something was going on here with the trepanation when they would deliberately drill a hole in these skulls and then put like a gold plate over the hole. And these holes were in small holes. Some of them were like 2 inches round, and the gold plates were fastened, and then the skin healed over that. So why are they doing this? It's extremely complex, and quite frankly, we've only scratched the surface.
The Paracas people, they seem that there was some kind of speculation or what happened to them. What was the cause of their demise? Were they hunted down? Were they killed by? How did they end, and why didn't they prosper? Was it a mass grave that you found? Was this kind of genocide going on?
Yes. Here's what we think happened: that they were not able to breed. And this is why, again, this is conjecture. We don't know. But their numbers began to dwindle. And there was one mass grave that we found in a place called Camacho. I'll never forget it. We walked up on top of this hill, which overlooked the Pacific Ocean. So it was a high place. And there was nothing honorable about this place. It was a kill zone. It was a killing field. And last time I was there, we counted 60 skulls. There were no funerary objects. There were no burials, nothing. These people were stripped of everything. They were killed from blunt force trauma to the left side of the head, which means someone who was right-handed had a war club and hit him on the right, hit them. So on the left-hand side of the skull, it's fractured. There's a hole in it, skull after skull after skull. These people were rounded up and systematically slaughtered in one place and buried in a mass grave. We found that. So it was very disturbing. I can't tell you how disturbing it was when I was first there and saw this. Extremely disturbing.
Yeah, sad. Man, that's just it is. It seems like there was a race amongst us that was basically totally different. Anything that we're aware of that any kind of humans are like this around today, and they were basically brutally wiped off this planet in a small little area that you discovered, and now there's these discoveries. There's going to be more updates coming up, I got a feeling, in LA. And how do people get in touch with you? We're going to be giving all the links below in the description if you want to check out L.A. Marzulli's updates. I know he has his Watchers series. How do people get in touch with you? Where do they check you out?
The best place to go is lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. We've got a compilation book, which is about 144 pages by all the team participants. We also, the DVD will be available. It's about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and about another week and a half it'll be ready to go, and you can go to lamarzulli.net. And I would suggest getting both the book and also the DVD, because the DVD has the entire presentation of the entire team, which is fantastic because you really get all the information that you want. And then when you sit down with the book, it further amplifies what you see in the DVD.
Well, absolutely. I got to thank you and Robert Shaw for allowing us to share your incredible trailer. I can't wait to get the DVD. Thumbs up L.A. Marzulli's website. Check him out. Get that DVD because Robert Shaw, he's a great documentarian, and this trailer that was shared with us, you could just tell that there was really quality the way this is produced, and you're really working hard getting the information out as well as putting out this informative DVD on location.
Thank you. And by the way, that's Richard Shaw.
Oh, absolutely.
That's okay.
Richard Shaw.
That's okay.
My bad, but Mr. Shaw, good job. I can see that you're doing justice to this incredible basically adventure, trying to find out where these Paracas skulls came from, and they shouldn't be there. And
exactly.
That's the amazing part. People, tell your friends, tell your politician friends, whatever. We've got to demand answers about what this is all about. We need to change the history books. L.A. Marzulli, look forward to speaking to you real soon, and look forward to that DVD. Take care, man. Glad you're getting over that.
Great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. We're going to be broadcasting live again the same time next week, Friday. Stay tuned to Third Phase of Moon for daily updates in regards to the UFO phenomenon. Keep your eyes on the skies, everybody. We're not alone. We'll see you guys real soon.